Just like the wide-winged dove sings a song, sounds like she's singing.
Just like acting in a play, directing a play starts with the script and asking pretty much the same questions. Why are we telling this story, and why are we telling it now? What's different is that the director also has to figure out the how. My first job was really to pull out the main theme of the play, and that could be what the playwright highlights, but it could also be what really speaks to me in this script. For me, the answer had to do with the idea of the personal is the political, something Gloria Steinem said over and over and over again. And of course, the greatest embodiment of that theme is the talking circle, a place where people share their personal stories and through that sharing are able to see that they are not alone. And the power of that discovery of shared experience, a reminder of our shared humanity, is immeasurable. And of course, in this particular play, the entire second act was a talking circle for the audience. So let's get back to figuring out the how. I have discovered that the best way to do that is to surround yourself with talented people, specifically designers. And in directing Gloria, A Life, I was lucky enough to have an amazing team. So let's start with the set. Emily wrote this play to be staged in the round. So how do we really honor the circle part of the talking circle when the theater, in this case Theater J, is a proscenium? So here's a rendering of the set by Paige Hathaway. You see that the stage literally steps down to be closer to the audience. We're saying to the audience, we're all in this together. We are sharing with you now, and later you'll share with us. We're all in this same space. And this set also enabled me to block scenes in other places besides just up on the stage proper. I was able to do it out closer to the audience, and it just gave me a lot more leeway. You can see here in the script where I've got on all of these other opposite pages a map of the stage, which is usually just used for stage managers. But I wanted to walk into the rehearsal as fully blocked as possible because there were so many locations and times and moving parts. And sometimes directing a play is all about transitions from one place or time or even one emotion to the next. And of course, another incredibly important element for defining those places and times is the lighting. This is the light plot by Colin K. Bills, which is never something that a director uses, but just to sort of illustrate that while I was trying to define spaces on stage with actors' movements, Colin was doing the same with lights. Speaking of defining time, my sound designer, Sarah O'Halloran, was hard at work on a couple of things, but one of those was pulling together music to help define our place in time. So here's a piece that takes one back to the mid-70s.
Daddy, hello, Mom. I'm your Jerry Bob.
And you'll notice in the script, even right on the first page, that the playwright calls for video montages. She calls this video overture. And these are yet another way to not only place us somewhere in time, but also to take us someplace emotionally. So here's an early mock-up of what my projection designer, Danny Debner, was doing. The last piece of the puzzle to help put us in the right time and place and attitude, if you will, is of course what my actors are wearing. And while all of those other elements I mentioned were being worked on, my costume designer, Moyenda Kulameka, was sending me all of these amazing images of people mentioned in the script.
I am woman, hear me roar, in numbers too big to ignore, and I know too much to go back and pretend, 'cause I've heard...
Now, I'm not really going to talk about my amazing group of actors because I really wanted this to be more about the making of, in other words, before rehearsals. So let me go back to the talking circles again, and specifically my anchor phrase, the personal is the political. One of the things that I really wanted to focus on was the fact that we were doing this play here in Washington, D.C. So as to the question of why are we telling this story and why now, unfortunately, it's never not timely to talk about equal rights. And the more we discuss these big themes in production meetings, the more it became apparent that we needed to broaden our scope. Phase one of that involved sending out a survey with questions that I came up with. We sent this out to a few hundred Theater J related folks, as well as others in the area. There were questions about Gloria Steinem and her activism, questions about the Equal Rights Amendment, of course, about Roe v. Wade, which sadly by that time was also a question about the Dobbs ruling, and a question about the women's movement past and future. And if we go back to the set rendering, you'll notice the pieces on the wall and the back of the set. These are typed up answers to the survey, which ultimately were joined by handwritten answers from the audience at each of the performances. So at some point, it also occurred to me that I wanted to hear those voices as well. So I ended up interviewing, I think it was about 20 people in the area asking those same questions, which of course ended up being much more far-reaching conversations. My sound designer then edited those down, and that is what the audience heard before the show as they entered the space.
I think that we need an intersectional approach to equality.
The women's movement struck me right in the middle of my life.
Yeah.
And really changed my life.
I walk into a room as a Black woman, and I immediately am like, I'm exhausted because I spend all day long minimizing myself for other people.
1965, I got an illegal abortion. I had to go to Mexico.
Without the work of Gloria Steinem, I would not have had the same access to education. I certainly wouldn't have had the same access to sports in schools. I would not have had any access to reproductive health. I would not have gotten equal pay for the job that I currently enjoy today.
That notion that adoption is an easy alternative is just absurd on its face.
Now, what you still had to do was, if you were pregnant and it showed, you had to quit work.
Clarence Thomas wrote a concurring opinion that also threw LGBT rights under the bus and like contraceptive stuff under the bus. It made me feel so powerless.
So the audience could hear the voices of the community and look on the wall and see the statements as well as add their own. And now here are the first few moments of the show with some of the elements I've mentioned. This is actually the land acknowledgement, which I wanted to be spoken by the cast. And there are most of my cast. From the left are Sherry Edelin, Sydney Lowe, Awa Salseka, Manny Angelmau, Deborah Crabb, and Aaron Weaver. The only person missing is Susan Linsky, who, of course, played Gloria Steinem and enters a few moments after what you're seeing now. And if you notice behind them on the back wall of the set are some of the notes, both typewritten by us and handwritten by audience members about people's experiences with the women's movement. So we and the cast are literally surrounded by the experiences of others.
Indigenous communities wherever we are.
And here you see the phrase, the personal is the political, because I really wanted that to be at the front of the audience's minds for the show. And hopefully they would keep connecting themselves with the story. Thank you so much for your time.